Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Iain Calvert. Iain, welcome back to the pod.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be back. It's good to be invited back. You never know how well you do, or if you said things to offend people.
You're one of our repeat guests. You're Mr. Ecommerce, as I call you. So it's
I'll take it.
That's right. We were chatting before the pod. You're zooming in live and direct from Thailand. I'm a bit envious.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm always a bit dubious to sort of. I don't know how to classify myself, because I think a lot of people think of like digital nomad if you're working in different places. Whereas me and my wife, we're in our 40s. I work for myself. I work remotely. She works for a fully remote business. So basically, 2 or 3 months of the year when it's winter in Melbourne, we just go work somewhere warm.
Not bad.
And that's what we've done since 2017. COVID was put a bit of a scupper sort of like in that. This year is a little bit different. We're overseas for 4 months because we rent and invest, and we had to move twice in 8 months. So we decided to put our stuff in storage and just lead into it and go see some family in the UK, do some stuff in Europe, Japan trip, and then we're here for like 6 weeks. So we'll go back the end of September, find somewhere to move, which will be a pain because October and e-commerce in October is really busy. But
it's a great segue into the topic of today's conversation.
There you go.
So I was going to say unfortunately, but it's definitely not unfortunately. But having young children really curtails my ability to leave the nation during winter for 3 months at a time. But for those of you that didn't listen to Iain's pod last year and who don't know of Iain, so Iain ran one of the largest independent e-commerce agencies in Australia for many, many years. That's when we crossed paths. He's been an independent e-commerce coach since 2018. He's worked over his career with lots and lots of brands like Billabong, Vogue, Quicksilver, hundreds of other brands, big and small. I love chatting with you because you're just e-com, and it's great to be able to speak to someone that does one thing really, really well. So it's great to get you on the pod to share expertise in that space. He's also an e-commerce advisory board member at Submarine by Disco Labs. So Iain, I thought I do want to dig in deeply into Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But before we do, like, what are you seeing out there? We're kind of now just past the halfway mark of 2023. It's definitely a challenging environment, I think, for many businesses, particularly many retailers. So, I mean, what are you saying? What are you seeing in online retail across all of your portfolio and all your clients and businesses you touch?
It's a really good way to lean into Black Friday, because we'll talk about how you approach Black Friday based on the position you're in. So across the industry, it's a really mixed bag. It's really interesting. There's definitely a lot of pain out there, but there's also businesses doing really well. I've got there's a business that I work with that they're massively up on last year, like massively. Like literally, we're looking at the numbers each week and like, wow, wow, this is good. Now their product appeals to a wide market and is value-based, but it's still possible to do well at the moment. But I really do think it's industry by industry. So I think a lot of discretionary spending for people that have got big mortgages is difficult. So there's lots of fashion bits and pieces that are going sort of like pretty tough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the businesses that have just faded from sort of like COVID too, whereas they're essentially just run off Facebook ads where you could get a cost per sale at like $5 and they're selling a $30 widget. Then they just try and sell, and essentially is it not viable sort of like anymore. Retailers, sorry, I never want to say omni-channel. I always think that's a really weird not technical, like industry thing to say. Retailers with stores and online, the mix between the online and the offline has really started to kind of like flick sort of like back.
So back to what it was pre-COVID kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because people want an experience. They want to go in store. There's actually only one brand I now work with that doesn't have a physical presence, because essentially it's diversifying that sort of like mix. And what we see is that the conversion rate for online is higher around where those stores are. I was actually consulting to a business the other day, like, we're going to shut our store. We've been running it 15 years. It's a real pain sort of like to run. I was like, do not do that. That is a terrible idea. Renegotiate your lease. That is a really key differentiator sort of like for you. But yeah, I mean, look, ad costs continue sort of like going up. Everybody's trying to pitch that loyalty and retention is the savior, and you're like, yes, you want to do that, but unless you're retaining 100%, if you retain 100% of your clients, you're going to be flat. If you don't retain 100%, you're going to go down, so you've still got to acquire sort of new ones. Yeah, that's kind of roughly sort of like what I see sort of like across the market. And it comes back to really good fundamentals. You've got to be profitable per sale. You've got to manage those costs really, really closely. You've got to know what your gross margin is. You've got to know what your percentage you're spending on advertising is. And you have to pull those levers on a weekly basis.
And in terms of the channels we spoke about last year, like any trends in terms of Facebook heading in a certain direction, any impact of Amazon, like just the big stuff, any impact of TikTok, obviously huge rise in impressions and time spent in platform in Australia. Like, are you seeing much from an e-com angle there?
Facebook is getting better. The Advantage Plus shopping campaigns are really good. The broad targeting is good. The interface is actually getting a little bit better.
Yes, I can tell you didn't even want to say that. I know how you feel about it.
Look, there's lots of people here that work with Facebook day to day, and if you want to have events, then I've got a little post up on LinkedIn that will allow you to vent on some of the issues you have. But I think it's they're adopting sort of like to the new norm. But as with anything, it's business by business, right? And this is always the case. And I know the classic thing for a marketer to say, and I actually call myself a reformed marketer now, is to say it depends. But I think understanding that nuance of that it depends is really important. So let's say, for example, off the top of my head, I've got one client that's doing really, really well, that the majority is Google Ads, and it's PMAX and broad match keywords. I would never have thought when we first met many years ago that I would be spruiking broad match keywords. But through running tests, I've seen that makes difference, but their product is searchable. As far as TikTok goes, for me, I have never worked with brands super closely where it's done really, really well for them, but that might just be the demographic of those brands. The targeting's not as good. There's challenges around creative and stuff like that. The fundamentals of the right mix of Google Ads, Meta ads, email marketing, some affiliate marketing still works really, really well. And it's just getting that kind of sort of like mix and it's finding that mix for each of the sort of like the businesses basically, and measuring at a P&L level how much you're spending across all of them, not trying to attribute to individual channels, just going, have we baked the right cake? So I have this new analogy that I really like, is that everybody tries to attribute to a different marketing channel what's making the difference. Whereas I think what we have to do is we have to go, I've baked a cake and it tastes really good. It's not because of the flour we put in it. So let's put more flour in, right? We can control the ingredients we put in, whereas let's pretend that the oven is controlled by somebody else, and that's the economy. And the economy will go up and down heat-wise. Sometimes it's going to stuff the cake. What can we actually control? Maybe we can open the door a little bit to let the heat out, but as far as let's look at the individual ingredients, what's the mix together? Is that working for us? And then adjust sort of like based on that.
I never thought we'd be talking baking cakes on the pod.
Mate, we're of an age now. We're of an age where baking's kind of interesting.
I'll never admit it. But yeah, I like it. And I think like obviously you do want to be running experiments and what channels are working and to what level. And I think that's the point, right? Is that every client, the mix will be a little bit different depending on who their customers are, what their product is, pricing, those types of components. But it is, generally pretty difficult to.
Can I actually just add on running those experiments? Because I think this is actually really key with all the businesses that I coach. That this other analogy I use is that, let's say there's 100 levers in front of you as running a business and marketing, and 10 of those will control your business, but you don't know which 10. So you've got to pull them to see what it does. And there's a question of, which ones you pull and how long you pull it for.
Yeah.
So me personally, what I'm doing is, let's say if we try, like, let's say if we try TikTok ads, the way I've been doing it is go, right, we'll run it for a month and we don't care what it says in the advertising platform. We'll use that to optimize, but have we made more sales based on this time last year, taking into all those other factors? Essentially, it's a money in, money out thing. So rather than testing for like a day and then go, no, we're not going to do it, it's actually there's a period of time that you test for to know categorically if it works or not. So in data science, it's called a black hole test. You basically turn it off and see what happens.
Yeah. Which can be risky, but
you learn the most. Honestly, that is where I've learned the most. It was, I can't remember if I've mentioned it last time, but when I was kind of cutting my teeth working for Billabong in the UK, it was costing like, I think it was like £15 to sell a Billabong t-shirt through Google Ads. And the Billabong t-shirt was £20. So by the time you take off the cost of goods and stuff, you're not making money, right?
Yeah.
We turned it off. We put it into sort of like SEO, and there's a lag time for that stuff to come in. And within 2 or 3 weeks, we saw our overall sales going down because direct sales weren't happening. There's a combination of it. We took the flour out of the cake. It didn't rise.
Yeah. It was a flourless chocolate cake.
Yeah, exactly. Which can work, but often it doesn't.
I getcha. Okay, let's talk what we came here to talk about. Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Yep.
What are your thoughts? How do we engage? How do we plan? Should we engage?
I think there's a lot of really good advice out there on Black Friday, and I think many subjects are kind of covered. What I think will be important for people listening is to go, what advice do you take? What levers do you pull? So let's say all the advice out there, like Shopify have just put a really, really good report out there on how sort of like to plan, and there's loads. There's loads of stuff, and there's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff too. Think about each of those pieces of advice. They're one of the levers that you then want to pull to see if that's going to work for your business.
Yeah.
So what you actually want to do is you need to assess where your business is and what you want to get out of Black Friday. Essentially, own Black Friday. Don't let Black Friday own you.
Yeah.
It's a very easy way. It's very easy to get caught up in the, oh my God, we have to do Black Friday and we have to do a massive discount and we have to spend loads on advertising.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you do a genuine 30% discount on, let's say, site-wide, right, which will get a big lift in sort of like sales, you do 30% off, that's basically pretty much 30% less to your profit, right? And then you're going to spend 30% of your revenue on advertising, you're making a loss. And then people people are, oh yeah, but we'll do that to get our repeat customers. Yes, but do you get repeat customers?
Yeah.
Like, are 40% of the people that buy from you, are they coming back, or is it a one-time thing? So for example, like there's an e-commerce business that I bought that I run sort of like on the side. It's really just 1 or 2 products. There's no repeat sort of like customers. So each sale has to be profitable. I'm not kidding myself that I can get repeat customers.
Yeah.
So let's say you run a furniture business. You might get some repeat customers, but it's not like you're buying moisturizer sort of like each month it needs to get refilled.
Yeah.
So let's say you go into Black Friday and you want to acquire customers because you know you're getting a load of repeat customers. There's an approach to sort of like take them, but ask yourself what you want out of it. Is it a case of, we need to clear this stock because we've got too much stock? We over-ordered because we were worried about not getting it. If so, and let's say some stock expires, let's say you're selling mattresses and they don't expand after a certain amount of time, right? We want to clear this stock. Like, that's our goal from Black Friday. Or we want to promote like a new product, or we want to get all our we want to increase our repeat purchase rate. So there's an offer for existing clients, existing customers. It's going into it knowing exactly what you want. Your cash position for the business. Do you need to inject cash? So you've got to liquidate stock, or is it that you've got limited stock of the good stuff and you want to get the most for it? And so you then want to do a different type of promotion. So basically, a couple of things you want to look at. You want to look at and I appreciate this is to marketers, but you also
Yep.
got to ask the business, what's the cash position? Do we need to build cash, or do we have a war chest that we can kind of like use?
Yeah, and I think we always talk on the pod, right? Like the best marketers are the ones that are having those conversations with the business, right? Talking money, talking profit. How do we actually?
Exactly.
It's not. We're not talking marketing metrics. We're talking business metrics. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you go, right, what's our stock position? Do we have lots of stock of our really good products, or do we have stuff that we need to clear? Like, because often it can take 60 days from placing an order to getting the product into your warehouse. Let's say if you're ordering from China, 30 days to make it, 30 days to ship it here. So what will the position be when you come to Black Friday, right? Looking at what sort of like the competitors are doing, there's going to be a lot of people in pain. So I think there's going to be some really big deals to really stimulate the economy, basically, particularly because like retail slows. It's the first thing that tends to slow once interest rates are going up and all of those bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And also what you did last year probably won't necessarily sort of like work this year. You might also want to collect a load of email addresses so that you can really drive your email marketing, which becomes a really cost-effective thing. So look at those factors, understand the position, talk with the people that run the business, the accountants, and get what does this business need out of Black Friday? You might actually find that it's not worth you doing. I have lots of brands that don't do it. Like, I actually think the default needs to be prove we need to do it, not we go and do it.
That's a really interesting perspective, right? Because I think we're probably, a lot of businesses are operating that level down where it is very much, well, we're doing it. Of course, we're doing it. We did it last year. How do we, and you're looking basically at how do we beat last year's revenue, right? As opposed to taking a step back and going, should we be doing this? And if we do, what's success look like rather than
exactly
top line revenue?
So yeah, is it top line revenue? Well, I mean, is it net revenue for a start, like minus GST, or is it net profit, or is it clearing stock? Is it, what are the, like honestly, if you're a marketer listening to this and you're thinking, I don't fundamentally understand these things, I couldn't explain it to somebody else. If you go to your client and say, hey, what does the business need? And then work back so that the marketing supports that, you're going to have a client for life. Honestly, that's what they want. They don't want to be told, increase your spending because Meta is not out of learning in this ad set. Honestly, that is like red rag to a bull. It's the marketing needs to serve the business. And if you show that understanding and have that curiosity to ask those questions, like, you are going to be head and shoulders above so many sort of like other people. So yeah, work out what it is that business then needs, and then come backwards from it.
Love it. Let's presume the answer is yes. Like, we do want to engage. Whatever it is, we've got some excess stock, which we're happy to discount, or we can bundle, or whatever it might be. Like, what are the practical things that you've seen kind of work in terms of approaching the period?
Can I get you to give me a specific instance of like a business, as in the too much stock, or you want to bundle stuff, or like what, like, could you roughly outline it, and then I'll explain what you should do and why?
Yeah, let's go, for instance, let's pretend we're a online retailer and we build watches for kids that are 8, 9, 10 smartwatches. They're locked down so that kids don't have access to social media, don't have access to web browsers, but can contact their parents and approved friends. So let's pretend we're a business like that, maybe, and then let's do a second, just a classic online retailer selling fast fashion.
Too much stock or too little stock?
Let's do the first one, too much stock, and let's do the second one, not enough stock.
So we'll start with too much stock. Do they get repeat customers?
The device, maybe a sibling gets one, maybe the kid breaks one.
Yeah.
This is totally you've got me on the fly here, because this is totally
fictitious.
I and then let's go that. But there's a recurring nature to, say, like a SIM card that has a $5, $10, $15 a month data plan with a mobile phone carrier.
Perfect. And sorry for putting you on the spot like that, but just
I'm a bit impressed by my example, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. Sorry, we should have prepared this before.
I just thought of something that my kid bought.
Okay, so you essentially you still need to be profitable for each unit you sell, because there's a chance they might buy a repeat one, but then there's kind of like the SIM card, the bit that sort of like comes after. So there's a little bit sort of like there, right? And we're overstocked. So if you're massively overstocked, the quickest and best way is to just do a blanket kind of discount. Like you kind of go 20% off for this sort of like amount of time. That will clear things really, really quickly. So if you're super overstocked and like, oh my God, we're gonna run out of cash by December. If this isn't good, this is what we need to do. So you're essentially kind of liquidating stock. You go big sort of like discount off we sort of like go, right? If you've got a bit too much stock, and every business either has too much or too little, you will never have the perfect amount of stock, and you're going to have random bits of stock sort of like as well. So let's say you're not super overstocked. What you would do is you would do an offer called like a buy and sell. So basically the offer is that you get the SIM card access free for 6 months, right? With potentially a little bit of a discount sort of like for it. So that would be the discount. So there's value then, and then there's like, okay, I'm bought in with the hope that then you're getting the reoccurring sort of like revenue built sort of like onto it, right? Now, you have the percentage that you discount is really closely related to your gross margin. That's not just the cost of the product. It's basically any variable cost, as in the shipping it from the factory to your warehouse and all those bits and pieces. There's a really good model to work off. It's called 50-30-20. 50% cost of that goes up and down for selling more of the product. 30% on your operating expenses, so like rent, staff, advertising, 20% net profit. So if you're on a 50% gross margin and you discount by 20%, you're all of a sudden down to 30%, which is like a big sort of like drop. So if you can go, hey, here's the SIM card for free for 6 months, they see the value, they use it, then you're going to get some reoccurring revenue. So that would be my sort of like approach there. The second instance, if you're understocked, you basically want to do a buy and save or spend and save. So it's kind of, you know, buy 2, get 20% off, or buy 2, get 6 month subscription for 2 SIM cards. Because what will happen is you'll get less revenue. So you won't get that woohoo moment that we like, but you'll get more profit, or gross profit as it's called. So do this a lot with lots of different retailers. There's a really good person to follow on LinkedIn called Jason Andrew. He wrote this amazing book called Stark Naked Numbers. It's about how to run a profitable e-commerce business. He talks a lot about these numbers. I highly recommend reading it and following him. I've learned so much from him. And
that's a great shout out.
Yeah, with a spend and save, you essentially, your gross profit goes up. You don't lose as much stock because you don't have that much sort of like in, and so then you get more profit. Basically.
Love it. I love that. Yeah, it's great advice. And then in terms of like we're in August now, as a marketer, you know, across all disciplines, the more time we have to plan and prepare, the better time to put creative together. What are the types of assets that you've generally seen? Like if you are going to run you've decided on the promotion that kind of works best for you. Like what's the kind of the things you'd normally be advocating a client to do in terms of getting the promotion out there into the market?
So it's really interesting. You essentially don't know what position you're going to be in at the end of November until like the start of October, right? Because how are sales going through August and September? So then actually that's when you can start making those decisions, and essentially then everything has to filter sort of like down. So I always try and get everybody prepared as early as possible, because it's a very busy time and there's a lot of moving sort of like parts, and everybody gets like, you know, the assets or the creative or the images or the videos and stuff to you as late as possible, and it makes it sort of like a little bit difficult. So it's knowing what position you're in October, and essentially it's doing as much prep for that as possible, and go, we could do this or we could do this. So what I tend to do is I just literally in like a Google Doc will write, what is the goal of this campaign, right? And it is to clear stock, or it's to increase the cash flow, or what have you, right? And then you go, right, what's our messaging? What's the promotion then going to be? Cool. Where are we going to put that promotion? Is that going to be on meta ads? If so, what's the format? And you get down to like a really inane detail very quickly. So then you can brief whoever's making the creative or the design, or let's say you're using influencers to do a campaign, to go, right, this is exactly what we need, and these are the dates that we then need it by.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about when to start Black Friday as well, but actually I can probably get onto that. But
Yeah.
it's having that prepared, and that there are deadlines in a timeline, and it's
Yeah.
making it clear that if those are not ready by this time, or a decision isn't made, because that's still an action, right? The decision is, what will the promotion be?
Yeah.
Will it be do we have too much stock, so we're going site-wide discount? Is it that we've got we don't have that much, so we're doing spend and save? These are the alternatives sort of like to it. It can then filter through sort of like really well. So
Yeah.
I think really you kind of mid-September, you can start have those planning meetings. For example, any of the businesses I work, we're not having those discussions yet.
Okay.
Because there's other things that we are then sort of working on. I know there's a lot of content out there sort of at the moment, but a lot of the businesses I work with were quite good at managing the stock, which becomes sort of like a key sort of like thing for it. It's one of those big levers that we kind of like pull. So then that's kind of mid-September, we can start thinking about those things. And then it's like, okay, so start of October, we need a decision from the business about what we want to get out of Black Friday.
Yeah.
And now if they come back to you and say, hey, we just want more sales, I would question it and say, what type of sales? And then you get some interesting stuff. But as a marketer, you've taken into account the business considerations, and then you can start planning through there. I have found that what works really well is extending the Black Friday period, because Black Friday it's not an official thing. There's an official day, but there's not a period for it. It's almost like, and there's this game, right? You play who sees the first Black Friday ad and who sees the last one, right?
How early are we talking, do you think?
Well, no, let's I mean, depending on what date this goes out, let's see if we're starting to see so. Let's put it this way. For me, a minimum is 2 weeks beforehand.
Okay.
Because essentially, if traditionally it's just over like a long weekend, right? It's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, so it's the Friday to the Monday. By extending that period, you get a greater opportunity of when people are actually ready to buy. So they might be interested in it. You're going to get your hardcore people that sit there and go, right, I'm going to go and buy on these days.
Yeah.
But if you introduce it early, you've got that kind of window of the period that you can then sort of like sell in, right? And depending on what you're selling. So let's say you're selling like a big ticket item that takes like a lot of research. Let's use an extreme example here, because I don't think a lot of cars are sold online unless you Tesla, which they're playing a different game, right? Is that there's only so much money in the market to buy something like that. So the earlier you start, you can take people out of the market. Whereas if it's an impulse buy, there's not so much research. And if you've got a good hook, you're kind of like good to go. So there's variations you can play with there. But for me, it's a minimum of 2 weeks out. If not before. You could do like a week. So let's say it's a total of 3 weeks. First week is, subscribers or existing customers only. Say, heads up, this is all happening. And then you go wider market. Before that, I've had a lot of success of pumping up the sale to say that it's coming. That is counterintuitive, but I didn't want to do it, and I've only started doing it the last couple of years. That can work really well too, because and again, this comes back to what your goal is and these things. These are just examples, but what I am seeing is that people are really holding off buying stuff because there was an uncertainty about interest rates. Yes, the last one, so we're recording this in August, so there was an interest rate sort of like the last one, and then you see a bit of an uptick in sort of like sales. So I think people are holding off, and the savvy shoppers know that these sales periods are coming, so you can then incentivize them to go, hey, do this sooner, sort of like rather than later. So the earlier you then start. And again, it's classic marketing, right? You just need to know your customer. You need to know your customer, the way they're behaving, talk to them, see what kind of like works, and then adapt Black Friday so that you own Black Friday and Black Friday doesn't own you.
And then in terms of the actual mechanics of prominent display on the website, obviously.
Yep.
Strong offers, using
Yeah.
your database, SMS, email.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. So you write your one-page document on this is what we're going to achieve. This is our main message. These are the sub messages that we'll try, and these are our different sort of hooks, and we'll see what kind of catches. Because
Yeah.
you've also got a challenge with performance marketing that, you know, there's learnings that kind of like happen. So you've got to just go with what, you know, what works. Those audiences that you've been running that are your go-tos of like, let's put the new ad in there. That's what you want to use. But
Yeah.
so like banner homepage, make it super clear, banner on category pages, message on product page. If you struggle with that, you can use pop-ups through something like Klaviyo or what have you. Like, for example, I've got a client that's on Magento. It takes forever to get anything changed. So we use Klaviyo heavily to then promote that at all the different stages. You want to match what you're talking about in the ad to the actual landing page of where you take people just to confirm it's there. Classic, don't kind of like make them think.
Yep.
So across all your channels that work sort of like really well, so let's say Google Ads, Facebook, I'm always a bit on the fence about, and I'll be keen to get your take on this, changing title tags for SEO so that it appears in the listings of having the promotion. I'm really against it.
How come?
Because you don't know when it's going to get recached and it will change. So if that page doesn't get recached until a week or two after Black Friday, somebody searches for kids watches. They say Black Friday deal up to 60% off, and then they go to the page. And I appreciate Google will change what's actually on the title tag. For me, SEO is not dynamic enough to do that. You don't have as much sort of like control. And
and to be brutally honest, in the agency, I can't think of a time when we've changed a title tag for an e-commerce promotion, if that makes sense.
I mean, I haven't, like, a client has to do it. I was like, I don't think we should.
Like we definitely work in a way that we're advocating that your page title, you know, should accurately describe what that page does, but it should be viewed as the same way it would be split testing through a paid ad title, because you're trying to optimize click-through rate. You're trying to get as many people on that search engine results page to click on that listing compared to, you know, your competitors. And obviously Google sometimes shows it, sometimes they don't show it. You know, gone are the days of stuffing the page title with the keyword, the fun days of the past. But yeah, I actually don't. I hadn't. Actually can't think of an instance of us doing it for kind of a short-term promotion, if that makes sense. Where obviously, if you hit ping Google to kind of recrawl the page and it doesn't, that you're kind of a bit out of date.
You can only ask it to recall like 3 or 5 a day or something.
Yeah.
But, so me personally, approach with SEO is you set up a Black Friday page.
Yeah.
And you have the same URL. You use it each year. You just update the details.
Yeah.
Like on that.
Makes sense.
Emails, series of like all the hardcore email marketers will kind of help me for hate on me for the delivery of this, but I go pretty sort of like hard and start wide in the campaign, go as many sort of as possible and sort of build up. I often like the, hey, this is coming, if you are doing sort of like kind of like the pump up ads beforehand. The other really interesting things that I only really cracked last year is the build up of spend beforehand. So, and again, this was for a client that there's a bit of a long sort of like lead time. So we work very closely on the MER, marketing efficiency ratio. And I'm sure most people are across it, but in case they're not, percentage of ad spend based on your net revenue is the target for what you spend on advertising. And you set that, we monitor that on a weekly basis. And we set that higher in the lead up, and then it starts to come down rather than turning it up on actual Black Friday and stuff like that, because it's very, very, very easy to overspend. Basically. If you've got an impulse buy, maybe it's slightly different. So again, it's kind of knowing what lever to pull. So a simple black and white description would be impulse buy, yes, turn up close to the time. If it's a bit more research, turn up to build your audiences and then put more focus onto like the remarketing side of things. Actually saves you a load of cash and makes you a load more profitable. So it definitely one to watch, because I've been guilty of that before. I'm like, oh my God, it's Thursday, turn it up. Just sort of like, kind of like go for it. and it was a bit of a risky one, but we like working very closely with the client, like, hey, what are we going to do? Like, let's try doing this. It's like, yeah, and it worked. When we did it for end of financial year, for example, we didn't keep turning stuff up. We would then see the first day of the promotion do really well, and then the last day would do really well, because we're humans, right? People either do stuff early or they do it late. Like tax returns, people either do it on the 1st of July in Australia or they do it as late as possible. Right?
100%.
There's very few people in the middle, right?
Yeah, that's really, I love that. That's great. That's very practical and very useful feedback there, Ian. I love that. And then how late are you happy to run them until, generally speaking, after Cyber Monday?
I normally like the Monday is kind of it.
Yeah.
You can say extend sort of like for a couple of days. Promotions are really interesting, right? Because essentially, and we are now in an environment, and I should have mentioned this before, where it's very common to just go from promotion to promotion to promotion just to stimulate things. And so that trains your customers to wait for that. Now, it's an easy thing to say from this idealistic point of view, don't do that. But you have to be a little bit careful with that. But the point is that essentially, you can come up with any reason for a promotion. The reason that Black Friday works so well is that it's in the public consciousness and people are ready to spend. So what we actually see is we see conversion rates go up massively and more people are ready sort of like to buy. Me personally, I don't go past sort of like the Monday. If you do say extended or, Black Friday extended to whatever, but, as we were talking about sort of like before, I saw an end of financial year for like a competitor of one of my clients like the other day. And I was like, is that intentional or is that just really lazy?
A little. I think we might have missed the boat on that one.
Yeah, that's right. Or I've had Facebook just randomly turn ads on, like, and I'm just like, that's not meant to be on. So yeah. But to answer the question, the Monday is normally when you can it, but you make a big deal about that's the ends. That's when anybody that's opened emails, anybody that's engaged, it's like, hey, we've got time. Oh, sorry. And the other thing on the site, countdown timers.
Yeah.
Love a countdown timer.
Yeah.
We're just geared towards them, right?
Humans get moved around.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, now.
Love it. The fear of loss. It drives a lot. Mate, that's been awesome. I think anyone who is in an e-com environment, you're a marketer working in-house, you're a business owner running your own e-com business, I think you'd struggle to listen to that and not find practical things you could implement into this year's strategy. Just quickly, how do people find you if they do want to chat with you about e-com?
Easiest way is LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. I basically, when I work something out, I'll share it or regularly sort of like share tips. So just Iain Calvert. So Ian with 2 I's, just to make it a little bit confusing. I get called Lane a lot.
Thanks,
I'm
Mum and Dad.
Or just search for Boom e-commerce. That's kind of my training sort of like brand as well. I will happily talk to anybody about e-commerce just because I really enjoy it. So I genuinely mean it. Hit me up. I love hearing the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. We'll look forward to having you back on the pod soon.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.